Chapter 15, AutoCAD and its applications. Today we're going to look at a quick review of Chapter 15 from AutoCAD and its applications. Obtaining drawing information is basically utility commands that will allow you to measure things like the area, the distance, the radius of certain geometries within CAD. We're also going to look at other options like determining the status, how much time, what would typically be called utility commands. The easiest way to take a measurement is to use grips, and that's provided that you have dynamic input on. And so if we take a look at this gasket drawing, and I were to click on this arc here, if I hover over the grip, it'll change from blue to red, and it will give me the distance as a radial value of 0.75. And I can then hit escape and clear the grips. If I go and I click on another area, I can go and hover over that grip and get that value as well. So it's very friendly for being able to analyze drawings, which we'll do quite a bit, because as we go through and we start to automate the manufacture of this type of equipment, we'll very often be using computer numerically controlled machines, which we can then give the values for the coordinates to, and it will automatically create those geometries or drill those holes. So that's an example of just hovering over a grip to get the measurement. It works as well on architectural drawings where we could have a floor plan and determine things like door openings. And so here's an example of the Skokie lab, and if we wanted to find out how big our garage door was, and this is the garage door right here, we come in here and we could say measure distance, and then typically you're going to want to use an object snap, and so I'm going to enable my O snaps, and then I'm going to go and select those points, and what I can see then is that it's 6 feet for my garage door opening. And that's very often used. Am I buying something that won't fit in there? Am I buying an 8-foot router table? So we very often will go through and analyze drawing properties and use that measure option. There's a lot of mechanical applications. Mechanical applications tend to be mathematically orientated, and I do like to use AutoCAD for things like trig to be able to calculate out angles and various things like that. Here's an example of a floor plan, and when we go through and we measure an architectural drawing, I'll show you how to do that with the Skokie campus. And so we have a Skokie campus drawing right here. And none of the walls are straight. And so when we go through and we start to analyze it, what we're going to want to do is use the area command and an object snap. And so we're going to say area, and then as we go through and we work through the area of the room, and then once you get to the point where you have the entire room covered, you hit enter, and it'll give you the value down here. And so what it's telling me is that the area is 2,233 square feet. Another way to check that value after you've hit the enter key is to hit the F2 key, which is the flip screen. And so you can go back and revisit those calculations, and you can copy and paste those. Control C, Control V, and then you can put those values onto the drawing. And that's a very useful tool for doing things like calculating out the cost of your flooring. Other mechanical parts like this object, very similar to the gasket drawing where I have an object that I will go through and determine the area. And so to do that, we'll take a look at our handy dandy gasket drawing. And so I'm going to turn off the dimension layer. Before I do turn it off, I'm going to switch over to a different layer, because when you turn off the layer that's on, it can give you some problems. I'm also going to turn off the centerline layer. So here we have the base geometry, and then in order to determine the area of this part, we can take a look at some of the values that they would be looking to determine. And so if we look at these CAD inquiry problems, there's one for this gasket right here. And they're very specific about how you do that and where the geometry is drawn. But to be able to calculate the total surface area with all the rectangles and the 10 holes removed, the way that we would do that would be, we'd go back to the drawing, and then we would create a region, because it needs connected geometry, it needs shapes. And then I can see that it's done it because as I hover over the geometry, I can see that there are multiple lines. And then what I would do is I'd come up here and I'd say area, down arrow, add area, down arrow, object, select this outside perimeter, hit enter, down arrow, subtract area, down arrow, object. And then you can subtract out these other shapes, and you can see that it's doing it because it's changing the color. And then if you read the command prompt down here, you'll also notice that the values are decrementing as I select the other geometries. And so once I'm done, it tells me the total area is 21.54. And so if I look at that exercise, the answer would be E, 21.54. And so that's an example of how you would be able to calculate the area on a mechanical part. Listing drawing data, a lot of your programs will use the geometric data for things like CAD CAM. And so we can come back into our drawing. I'm going to hit escape and just say list. And then if we select a geometry and hit enter, it'll tell you everything about it, what the perimeter is, the total area, location of different coordinates. Reviewing the drawing status, checking the time is a good thing. You can go through and see how much time was spent on a drawing. If I type in the word time, it's kind of neat because it also tells you when the drawing was created. So this is a rather old drawing created back in 2001, January 23rd. And then it'll also tell you things like how much time was spent on the drawing, when it was created, and things like that. And so that's the time command. Quick Calc is kind of just a value added element to the AutoCAD. For me, and a lot of people will say, you know, I have a calculator on my laptop, I have a calculator almost everywhere in my phone, so one more calculator in the computer doesn't necessarily help. But it does allow you to have that ability to have a calculator within the program. And so it does everything that a calculator can do that you would expect it would do. Comparing drawings, we typically go through that in some of the more intermediate to advanced. It's a new option, and it'll allow you to go through and see if the two drawings have got similar data. And again, this isn't really the kind of thing that we'll do in the first class, so we won't spend a great deal of time on it. But essentially what it'll allow you to do is to check for what's in the two drawings, how they are alike. At the end of the chapter, there's some good review problems, so I'll take a look and create some video for things like how to calculate the areas of the perimeter in another video. But that takes care of chapter 15 and how to calculate out drawing area and analysis.